Good evening. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight. It's the Jewish Passover holiday. I look forward to being with you next week again. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that next week the third film critique is due. Okay, so last week we looked at John Sayles, one of a handful of independent voices who broke through in the late 70s and the 80s. It was a tough time for independent film. Sayles proved that there was a place for thoughtful, issue-oriented cinema for a niche audience, that it was viable. And, you know, today there's a lot more place for film. There's a lot more cable television channel. There's a lot more home video, DVD, and such. But at the time, there were much more limited outlets. It was much harder to find a venue for your work and to get funded. You know, he's a rare person in that he continues to be a script doctor for big Hollywood movies while doing, you know, his own less commercial work. He's very aware of the differences in what Hollywood kind of wants and what he wants to do. He's a rare individual in that he's able to continue to live in both worlds. And so tonight, I want to discuss minority directors and directing voices in American film. There have been minority film directors for a long time, but few have broken into mainstream Hollywood film. Or been supported by Hollywood or enjoyed commercial success until, you know, perhaps the 1970s was when, you know, the first time when you really started to get a sense that there were minority film directors. B-movies and exploitation films, and that was the principal area where minorities would be given a chance to work. But generally only to work on projects that had kind of stereotypical presentations, or if they were issue-oriented, they were really given just a small release, just not much of a profile. That was their door into work, but it didn't allow them to kind of break through into the mainstream. Directors like Oscar Micheaux, actor Sidney Poitier directed quite a bit. Michael Schultz, Melvin Van Peebles. They were black directors who had success, but in kind of a limited way. To the degree they tried to be more realistic or confrontational about race issues, the films were less successful and got less backing in terms of breaking into the mainstream. Commercially minded distributors just shied away from issue-oriented material, especially with the idea in the late 70s that you could make big money for film. It was like, why would we make a film like that when we could make another Star Wars knockoff, or Raiders of the Lost Ark, or, you know, Jaws 2 and 3 and 4. The theater slots that were available went to commercial films. That's what the business people wanted to do. And commercially challenging fare was limited to art house theaters. So despite, you know, the success of some issue-oriented white directors like Stanley Kramer, who we've talked about, and Norman Jewison was another white director who did race and class and issue-oriented kinds of things and had success. But tonight's featured director was undaunted by the difficulty confronting him. Spike Lee came on the scene in the late 80s and changed everything for black directors and for other minority filmmakers as well. Next fall, I will be teaching a whole course on Spike Lee, and so tonight's lecture is sort of a teaser trailer of what that course could be. Combative, unapologetic for the controversies surrounding his work. Spike Lee has made enduring and groundbreaking films that have brought an honest voice to film and showcased sort of the seething, repressed social issues that get glossed over or dealt with superficially or in subplots in other films. But you know, racism and bigotry, class consciousness, these things are right in the forefront of Spike Lee's work. Spike Lee has been dubbed by some the Black Woody Allen, principally because he also features New York City in much of his work. In the late 80s into the 90s, which I call really the last decade when feature film really drove the cultural dialogue and drove popular culture, Spike Lee was one of the most prominent voices in feature film during that time. Spike Lee was born Shelton Lee in Atlanta, Georgia in 1957. His mother was a school teacher. His father was a respected jazz musician. When Spike was still young, the family moved first to Chicago, and then as music opportunities opened up, the family moved to Brooklyn and settled there. Despite Brooklyn's reputation now as a kind of an African-American haven, at the time that Lee's family moved in, there were very few black families, black people living there. It was largely an Italian Jewish community, a real melting pot of many minorities. So this true diversity of the city was something that really was predominant in Spike Lee's childhood memory. Also, Lee's family they purchased their house when they moved to Brooklyn, as opposed to renting, which most other black families rented when they moved into the area. Owning their home and not having to be under the control of landlords was another thing that really marked Spike Lee's consciousness. He was very aware that they owned their home, they had more control over what they had, they were able to live a little better than a lot of the peer families who moved in. Education, the arts, and family were big values in the Lee household. And Spike Lee was the eldest of 5 siblings. His mother called him Spike early on for his sort of fiery personality. He was given a lot of responsibilities, and he was sort of seen as a natural leader and organizer, both of his siblings and cousins, family who were around, but also, on the schoolyard and out in the street for, games and sports. He was seen early on as someone who had that charisma, that leadership capability. As a kid, though, Spike Lee really had only aspirations to be an athlete. He really dreamed of growing up and being a baseball player. He attended the traditionally black Morehouse College in Atlanta. And after his sophomore year of college, he came back to home to Brooklyn for the summer, and he couldn't get a job, couldn't find a summer job. So he spent that summer, he had a Super 8 movie camera. He spent the summer just going around the city, filming different street scenes, just playing around with the camera. He didn't have much of a plan or a structure, but he didn't have a job, and that's what he spent his summer doing. When he went back to school for his junior year, he really had taken all kinds of electives, and he needed to choose a major. And he chose mass communication and film, not out of any deep commitment initially, but it was interesting to him. He had this great summer. And it was at that time that a film professor had a very profound influence on him. He knew what Spike had been doing over the summer, and he encouraged him to edit the footage together in a way that had an opinion, in a way that had a point of view. And this really lit up Spike Lee's imagination. He took that footage and he intercut the kind of happy street scene footage with footage of the looting there had been some power outages and blackouts during that summer, and there was horrible, mad looting that went on in Brooklyn. So he had this sort of happy New York footage and footage of looting, and he kind of intercut that together in a powerful counterpoint. It was also during this time kind of the heyday of disco music, and he used that in the soundtrack. He added a voiceover, and the film Last Hustle in Brooklyn was his first real film, and it really just inspired him when he saw what he came up with, even though it's sort of very crude in its construction. And Lee has commented about how sort of he's embarrassed by the crudity of his very early short films, but personally it made a huge impact on him. And this film professor who really helped guide his his inspiration and steer him into making more films. And he really started just, making a lot more short films throughout his college career. After college, he enrolled in the NYU Film School. There were no black filmmakers really to follow in any, strong way. It was sort of an odd pursuit. There were very few minorities, certainly a few black people in the graduate program at NYU. And his mother had passed away recently, and his father had a girlfriend living at home. He didn't want to move home. He didn't know where he was going to live, how he was going to do this, but he had a cousin who put him up. And his grandmother funded much of his student films, had helped him in Atlanta, and continued to help fund his films at NYU. This is just consistent with his feeling that if you have your family behind you, he has said, that's half the battle. And family has continued to be a big value for Lee, not always at the forefront of the plots of his films, but certainly in the fabric. And you see the families that don't work, or the people that don't work because they don't have a family, and the strength of the family unit, and even the tensions within the family unit. It's something that's of interest to Lee. So he's at NYU. And the film school does a big ceremony to honor D.W. Griffith and his groundbreaking early cinema film, Birth of a Nation. This film was overtly racist. It really glorified the Ku Klux Klan. It was, as a piece of filmmaking, it was quite groundbreaking at the time. But Lee at NYU was just incensed that so much honor would be given to Griffith in this film. In response, he makes his own short film called The Answer, which is an indictment of Griffith. It's about someone who's hired to do a remake of Birth of a Nation from a black point of view. It's a short film, also kind of crudely put together, but the NYU was not happy with his film, which was very much a response, an indictment of Griffith, and they really threatened to expel him from NYU. It got that heated, and he certainly was no shrinking violet about that issue, and he threatened to sue. Anyway, he ended up staying in school at NYU Film School, and was quite a high-profile person there. In 1983, he makes his final thesis film at NYU called Joe's Bed-Stuy Barbershop, We Cut Heads. This film won the Student Academy Award. It was the first student film to be featured by the Museum of Modern Art's New Directors Series. This was a big thing for Spike Lee. He was seen very early on as a new voice in cinema. This film got him into festivals all over the country and outside the country. And for the first time, Lee travels abroad. And it really opens up his mind to world cinema, other work, and other cultures. And at the same time, the press is wining and dining him, they're interviewing him, and he's feeling really, full of himself. Never a shrinking violet, as I said, but his ego is really fueled. And at this point, he starts planning his ambitious feature film debut. It's going to be a big movie. And he starts leveraging the grant money that he's won, and the press that he's gotten, and influence that he has, and trying to put together this big movie. But it's just too big a vision. Logistically, it's big. Financially, it's big. And after so much effort, it doesn't work. The whole project collapses, and Lee is crushed. He doesn't know what he's going to do. He's in Brooklyn. He has a job working for a film company for a low wage, but all the heat is now kind of leaving him, and he realizes he's in difficult straits. He still knows what he wants to do. He hasn't given up hope, but he decides he's going to make a film that is smaller, that has got some commercial appeal, and that he knows logistically he can get done. And so in 1986, his first feature film, She's Gotta Have It, was made for under $200,000. It was shot in 12 days, and it grossed $8 million, and then some. It's a story about sexual relationships amongst black characters, told from the women's perspective. This was what Lee sort of saw what was out there, so I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to make it from the woman's point of view. The film was an art house sensation. And among the black community, Lee and this film were tremendously celebrated. It was a huge event that a black filmmaker got a film out. I mean, it seems like today, why should that be a big deal? But it really was at that time. And celebrities took notice. This was a time of black culture ascendancy in the country. Eddie Murphy was the biggest movie star in the country, with Trading Places and 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop. And on television, The Cosby Show had just come on and become very popular. Hip-hop music was on the rise. So black culture was certainly rising, becoming more popular, but in the feature film world, it was still very unusual that there would be a black director. And so, Spike Lee was of a moment and really benefited from that. The success of She's Gotta Have It allowed Lee to start his own production company. Rather than say, okay, there's success, now I'm going to go to Hollywood and work there, he wanted to start his own company and have, control of his work. He wanted, he realized that with his success as one of the few black filmmakers working, he had a responsibility to tell the truth, that he wanted to use this power to tell truths that Hollywood really wasn't doing. That was his personal feeling of a mission. And that was made easier for him in 1987. Filmmaker and actor Robert Townsend, who had been a character actor in Hollywood films, made a film called Hollywood Shuffle, which sort of lampooned and highlighted the racism in Hollywood in their casting, in their plot lines. It was a comedy, it's very funny, and it made a big splash, and again, helped open the door for Lee to do more work and have a bigger profile. In '88, Spike Lee makes the film School Days, set at a fictional black college. It focused on color and class conflicts within the black community. He really had contempt for the whole Greek system, fraternity, sorority system at universities. He felt there was this materialism, this sort of class consciousness that really was unsavory within the black community, that stratified and broke apart the black community. And he didn't like that the university seemed to support this bad behavior. He wanted to shoot at Morehouse College, where he had gone to school, his alma mater, but the university got wind of the script and Lee's reputation, and they were afraid that he was really going to sully their reputation, and they turned him away. He was not able to shoot at Morehouse College, which frustrated him, but he did find another university nearby where he could shoot the film. It was a modest success, but many in both the white and the black community felt Lee was maybe being, too combative, too divisive. Spike Lee was just getting warmed up. He poured all the profits from School Days into what would be his next film, his landmark project, which is tonight's film, 1989's Do the Right Thing. So this film, Do the Right Thing, was based in his neighborhood in Brooklyn where he grew up. It's set on one summer day, the hottest day of the year. And the story was inspired by actually a Twilight Zone episode that Spike Lee had seen in his youth about a scientist who was doing experiments on people to see if heat would make them more violent. And in the Twilight Zone episode, eventually the scientist is killed by the subject of his experiments. Do the Right Thing caused a sensation and a huge controversy for its content. Many saw the film itself as combative and bigoted, itself. Some theater owners feared the film would incite riots. They wanted to not show it. Spike Lee fiercely struck back in the press, saying, this response itself shows, the bigotry and prejudice of Hollywood and the theater owners, that they would think that a film would, incite people to violence, where there are so many other things that more rightfully, he would say, might incite that kind of behavior. It certainly put Spike Lee back in the center of media attention, for better and worse. He was in a swirl of attention and brought lots of these issues he was dealing with to the fore. In the 90s, following this film, Lee would inspire and sometimes directly support other black filmmakers in the 90s. I mean, it was a big explosion. John Singleton, Mario Van Peebles, Julie Dash, Spike Lee's DP, who became a director, his NYU classmate Ernest Dickerson, the Hughes brothers, the Hudlin brothers, the Wayans, all came to the fore largely in the wake of the work and the attention Spike Lee brought to black filmmakers. And even Latino and Native American filmmakers were able to get work done largely because of this raised profile and interest in minority film work. And Spike Lee's success and aggressive promotion of minority filmmakers, was a large part of what happened in the 90s. So after this, Spike Lee's career, itself takes off. He does Mo Better Blues, about the struggle of a black jazz musician. Jungle Fever, a story about interracial romance. Malcolm X, classic biopic. This was a film that Warner Brothers had planned to make, and had actually hired Norman Jewison, great director, to direct it. Spike Lee meets with Norman Jewison and convinces him that he needs to drop out. He says, this film cannot be made by a white director. Jewison had great success doing In the Heat of the Night, doing other films with racial content, but Lee respectfully but aggressively goes after the situation. And eventually Norman Jewison does step away, and then Lee gets the job, although the studio is really all over him. And the story of the making of Lee's film Malcolm X is a great story in and of itself, well worth reading about. There are books just about that film, and certainly in any book about Spike Lee's career. He continues working with Crooklyn, Clockers, Girl 6, Get on the Bus, He's Got Game, Summer of Sam, and that's just through the 90s. That just takes you to the end of the 90s, and it doesn't even include Lee's documentary work. He's getting interested in documentary films. So aside from all these feature films I've just mentioned, he's doing 2 or 3 documentary feature films, plus directing commercials and music videos. He is a dynamo. He's working everywhere. This body of work, it's the most extensive vision of the black experience ever presented on film. Lee, from the beginning, he wanted to take a different route. He wanted to step away from the kind of low culture exploitation films that had been done before him by his predecessors. He just didn't want to do that. It was a step forward from what Sidney Poitier had been doing as an actor and as a director. Poitier wasn't subservient, but he always was the polite, safe stereotype of the black man, and he was rarely combative. Lee was decidedly more challenging. Think about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which we looked at earlier. I mean, if you can imagine, instead of bringing home the Sidney Poitier character, what if Mookie or Mars Blackman, these memorable Spike Lee characters, what if one of them was the one that came home with Joey Drayton in that movie? That would have caused a bigger stir and a much different conversation. By this point, Lee must be considered not just a great black director, but a great director. Great film director in his own right. He's one of the most prolific American filmmakers. He's credited and employed his family throughout his career, often casting his sisters Joie in parts of the film, hiring his father, Bill Lee, to do music in many of the films. One of his brothers, Chris, he hired as a still photographer, and Chris Lee continues to be one of the top on-set still photographers and other professional still photographers working. He's very aware of the public perception of the weak family unit in the black community, and since it was important to him, that's something he wants to highlight. So since the millennium, because I just sort of took you to the end of the 90s, Lee certainly continued to work and be prolific, but his interests have, changed and broadened. He spends more time doing documentary film now. He did a documentary film about the Black Panther leader, Huey Newton. He's done a film about the football great Jim Brown. He's done 2 different films about the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans and what happened to people after that. This is just a partial list. He also teaches in the film school at NYU and occasionally at Harvard. His films have gone through kind of an evolution of thought and focus. Less directly on race and more on class in terms of conflict. He's still no stranger to the press, and when he sees something that he feels is just an outrageous exploitation of race or resembles a bigoted or imbalanced view, he's right there commenting and pointing out racial bias. Nevertheless, while his films retain an edge and often kind of this sort of, dangerous, combative quality and anger sometimes, the subject matter broadens. It's no longer just about the black experience. In 2006, he had great success with a film called Inside Man. It's a caper movie. It does have a social conscience, but there's nothing, specifically in the plot about race or class. And it's a rare Spike film also, and Spike Lee film also, in that his name is not used to promote the film. The film is promoted, for its story and to some degree for its stars. Clive Owen and Denzel Washington were the 2 stars of it. Why did he make this movie? He said he read the script and it was a terrific script. And that he just felt like, he's first and foremost a filmmaker, and when he sees, the script is good, he wants to make it. It was, a great piece of work for Lee. That was 2006. He's made 10 films since then, including many more documentaries, some about opera. He loves films. He's made several documentary films about opera. He's currently, today, in post-production on a film that was largely funded by a Kickstarter campaign. And that's controversial too, because many people feel that Kickstarter should be, left to unknown filmmakers, and that people like Spike Lee, who have access to capital, should, leave that sort of rare, finite money available to Kickstarter for up-and-coming filmmakers. So we'll see what happens, and that story's still playing out. Spike Lee always seems to find himself in the center of controversy. And one has to ask, it seems to be a position that attracts him and drives him. Tonight's film, Do the Right Thing, it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Script, and Danny Aiello was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in this film. It features many of the sort of trademark Spike Lee aspects of film style. Bold use of color, canted angles, reminiscent of Hitchcock, Spike Lee became a big fan of Hitchcock. And multiple story threads, which is something he really got from Kurosawa. He's also a big Kurosawa fan. There's many moments of improvisation. Spike Lee likes to do that, get some actors together and just let a scene go. The recurrent line, "Wake up." This is a line that appears in many Spike Lee films. It's a call to action of social conscience that he puts in many of his films. And then the signature Spike Lee shot called the double dolly, or the glide, where the camera and the actor are kind of hitched up on 2 dollies and glide through a scene which is a somewhat surreal view in moments of heightened tension or drama. And you'll see this also in Do the Right Thing. In 1989, when Do the Right Thing comes out, the film that wins the Academy Award for Best Picture that year is Driving Miss Daisy, a film that highlighted safe racial stereotypes. At the time, Lee was incensed and very vocal in the press. He says, look, in 20 years, no one will be looking at Driving Miss Daisy, and Do the Right Thing will still be vibrant and watched and relevant. It's now 25 years since Do the Right Thing was made, and Lee was quite prescient. No one really looks to Driving Miss Daisy anymore. And Do the Right Thing is still a film that gets seen and watched and discussed for relevance. We'll talk next week about the movie and its title. When you get to the end of the film, I want you to think for yourself, what would you have done in this situation? And does Mookie do the right thing? I look forward to seeing you next week, talking about the film. Enjoy the movie. Have a good evening.